Hello. Thank you for attending our webinar today. We have a wonderful topic. It's how to recover from Google Panda penalty. But before we get started, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. So this webinar will be recorded, and we'll be distributing the on-demand version as well as the deck in the upcoming week. So if you missed part of the presentation, never fear. We'll get that out to you a little bit later. The second thing is that this is an interactive webinar, so we encourage you to ask questions during the presentation, and at the end of the presentation we'll follow up and answer any questions that you might have. Now let's talk a little bit about PointIt. So PointIt was launched in April of 2002. We're Seattle's largest independent search marketing firm with services such as paid search management, SEO, social, and mobile. Last year we managed over $30 million in media budgets on the advertising side of the business, and we service clients across all verticals and revenue models. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Sam McRoberts and Jason Demers, who are going to tell us a little bit about the definition of Panda, and they're also going to talk about how we can alleviate Pandalization. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Preston. So it's like this. Google loves awesome content. They love quality search results. They love big money. Bad search results, unfortunately, mean less money for Google. So if your site is of a lower quality or a lower user experience and you rank well, and somebody visits your site from a Google search result, they're unhappy, which costs Google money. People are then less likely to use Google as a search engine. And this makes Google sad, and thus we have a sad Panda. So Google Panda, it's an algorithm change that looks at a handful of changes. You have thin or otherwise low quality content. You have duplicate content, either on-site or cross-site. You have too many advertisements or affiliate links, and it's a ratio compared to the amount of content on the site. You have your link profile, which can be devalued, and you have slow loading pages or sites as a whole. Now at the end of the day, Panda can be summarized in one word, and that's usability. Knowing that, you know that Google will continue to look for and penalize things that cause a poor user experience. So as an example of usability, which is the very definition of Google Panda, we have Zappos. Now they're a shoe company. They're known for providing awesome customer service. They were recently acquired by Amazon for over $1 billion. And they put a ton of resources into usability testing, into making their website as user-friendly as humanly possible. And in fact, they're so user-friendly that according to search metrics, with the latest version of the Panda update, Zappos actually increased their search visibility by 29%, which is huge. So Panda doesn't necessarily mean a penalty. It may also mean a boost to a very user-friendly site.
So what you see here is a list of dates, and each of these dates is a date on which the most recent version of Panda was released. So this list of dates is really, really important because if you look at your analytics data and you see a sharp drop in organic search traffic on or really close to one of these dates, then it's likely that you are hit by a Panda penalty. So Google usually doesn't disclose the details of an algorithm update other than in very broad terms. For some of these updates, Google said nothing at all, as a matter of fact. However, we do know that all of the variations of Panda have to do with usability, and so we're going to break this down into 5 main areas to consider. Chances are pretty good that as we go through this list, if your site was hit, you'll see the reason why. And because Google rolls out these updates incrementally and begins in a narrow geographic area, your site may not have been hit until recently, or maybe it hasn't been hit at all. So the date on which your site was hit isn't as important as the fact that your site was hit on one of these dates.
So the most recent version of Panda is being called 2.5, and it came out on September 28th of this year. If you look at this image, you can see a screenshot from Google Analytics, and this was actually taken back in February when Panda was first released. But this shows exactly what a Panda penalty looks like inside Analytics. You know, things are going fine, normal weekly up and down, and then all of a sudden you tank. And you stay down, and you stay down. And as you can see, this site actually recovered a little while down the road, a couple of weeks after that first Panda update. But Panda, with the most recent version, has been expanded. The initial version hit lower quality sites, but the newest version, 2.5, has actually been hitting much higher profile websites. Sites like Entrepreneur.com, PR Newswire, Motor Trend, GamePro, and a bunch of others. So that makes this version of Panda a little bit different. We know that Google, for the longest time, has had a couple of different biases. They have a brand bias. They're show a little more favoritism towards larger brands. And they also have a news bias. They recognize that news websites and press release websites are by nature going to have a little bit of duplicate content. So they've been giving them some exclusions in terms of penalties and rankings. But with this update, it looks like the brand bias is actually being removed, and Google is moving towards a more level playing field. Search Metrics, we're going to quote them a few times in here. They're a website that monitors search results share, and they illustrate the difference in ranking visibility before and after a Panda update.
So according to Search Metrics, Entrepreneur.com lost 68% of their search visibility, which is defined as the number of key terms for which they rank well. So while we don't know exactly why any given site was hit by Panda, we can definitely make some good guesses. On this page, there was no text content above the fold, but there were two very large ad calls. The page load speed was absolutely horrible. There were 185 requests with a load time of 33 seconds. So to put that in perspective, a good load time according to Google is 1.4 seconds. Also, in some instances, pages on Entrepreneur.com trigger splash screens, which further hamper usability.
For Motor Trend, Search Metrics showed that they lost 31% of their search visibility with the latest Panda update. In this screenshot, we see a similar circumstance to Entrepreneur. We see no text content above the fold, but we do see 3 unique ad calls. On this site, the page load speed was 36 seconds with 175 requests. The homepage, which we didn't show here, was so incredibly cluttered that it was actually hard for us to even find this article. We weren't sure where we needed to go next. And so Panda, it's about usability, right? They want to understand how people are interacting with websites and what things make for a frustrating user experience. So all of these things, too many ads, slow load times, all of those negatively impact the user experience. And that's what Google's trying to quantify with the Panda update.
So how do you know if you've been Pandalized? Well, let's take a look at some of the reasons for Pandalization. The first is duplicate content, either on-site or cross-domain, and we'll get a little later on. We'll get exactly into what duplicate content is and the definitions and differences between on-site and cross-domain. Next is thin or otherwise low-quality content, which is similar, but it does have some differences, which we'll cover later on. The next is an ad-to-content ratio. So we'll be looking at advertisements, affiliate ads, and how that relates to the content and how you can be penalized for a bad ratio and what that means. Next is a link profile devaluation, and we'll get into that. Slow loading sites or pages, and there are also many other things that can cause a poor user experience.
So here you see an example of cross-domain duplicate content. Now this is a screenshot from 2 different medical sites, one Stanford and one Yale, and they're both talking about chest x-rays. Now in this instance, this particular content is being pulled from a medical resource library called Atom. And this content on both of these pages is 100% identical. And this is something that Google really doesn't see. The reason being, if you were to go to Google and search for chest x-ray, if Google were to show you 10 pages, 10 different websites, but each of those pages had the exact same content, as a searcher you'd get pretty frustrated. That's not a good variety of search results, and that's not something that Google wants to see. So they really frown on cross-domain duplicate content. Now, this type of duplicate content, sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not. Some website owners just don't know any better, and license content much the way that these two sites have. But it's the most hated type of duplicate content for Google because it muddies up the search results. The other type of duplicate content is on-site. And this is whenever you have multiple versions of the same or very, very similar content on your own website. This is usually unintentional, and in a lot of cases it's related to a poor CMS or something that's wrong with your content management system. To give an example of that, with WordPress, by default you end up with tag pages, category pages, and author pages. And each of these is pulling in a snippet from every blog post written by that author about that tag or category. And from a search engine's eyes, this creates a form of duplicate content. It's not good for the user experience. Now this is less likely to be truly penalized, but it's still possible and it still contributes to a poor user experience. So both types of duplicate content you want to avoid. So now that you know what duplicate content is, How do you figure out if you have duplicate content? So there are two key resources for this that we use. Copyscape.com is one of the best resources for determining if your content is being used on other websites. They're dedicated to protecting valuable content online. It's one of the most powerful and popular online plagiarism detection solutions, and it's been ranked #1 by a lot of independent tests. Really useful, really easy to use. Just go to copyscape.com. You drop in the URL for your website or the particular page that you're looking to check, and Copyscape will go through their index and say, hey, either we're not finding this content on any other site, or we did find this content, and these are the websites that it's located at. It's the best way that I know of to find cross-domain duplicate content. Your other option for on-site duplicate content, the fastest way to find this is with a Google search using what we call a site domain query. You go to Google, and in the search box you type in site : and then your website.com, a space, and then you take a sentence from one of your pages up to 32 words in length, drop it in quotes, and hit search. And Google will then crawl your site and tell you if it's found that exact content phrase elsewhere on the page. So this is an example of Copyscape Results. If you're searching for cross-domain duplicate content and you use their tool and it finds duplicate content, it's going to pull up a page that looks just like this. It'll say, yeah, we scanned this URL and we found the exact same content on these other websites. Just gives you a list of all the sites it found that use that same content. Great way to find that cross-domain duplicates.
So in this example, the CMS on this site allows product search result pages to be sorted by different features. While useful, it also creates duplicate content in the form of identical product pages on different URLs. So this is a perfect example of on-site duplicate content. The site : domain query is perfect for detecting this type of dupe content. So if you have dupe content anywhere on your domain, you have two options. You can either remove it or rewrite it. Even if it's your original content and a scraper is ranking ahead of you with it, you still need to either remove or rewrite it. You can try to contact that site to have it removed, but often it won't work. And actually, Sam has a story about a guy who tried to do just that.
Yeah, so I read this story a few weeks ago, and I went back and tried to find the link to this so I could include it in the deck, and I couldn't find it again. But there was a guy, he had a website, he had a lot of unique content on this site, and he was ranking really well for his keywords, his keyword categories he was going after. And some scrapers, people who take content from other sites, put it on their own and claim it as their own, took some of his content and started ranking ahead of his site. He was frustrated. He contacted the scrapers to take down the content, and they didn't. He contacted Google to notify them that other people had taken his content and were ranking ahead of him. Google responded with, "We're sorry, we can't really do anything about that." They couldn't determine who the original source of the content was. So he decided, all right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put AdSense, which is a Google platform that allows you to show ads on your website and make some money whenever people click those. He decided to put AdSense on his site to try and recoup some of the cost from his lost rankings. Well, when he went to sign up for AdSense, Google told him, "We're sorry, you can't have AdSense on this site because it's got duplicate content." So in this instance, he had the unique content. He was the original source, but other people ranking ahead of him prevented him from showing up for his keywords and from making any money off AdSense for it. So just to iterate how much of an issue this is, in a worst-case scenario, if you have duplicate content, or even if you're the original source and somebody else is ranking ahead of you for it, you may actually have to remove it or completely rewrite it to get rid of that duplicate content penalty. Now that you know what duplicate content is and how to find it, you have to know how to fix it. So for on-site duplicate content, there are just a handful of ways to do that. One is using your robots.txt file. This is a file that goes in the root directory of your website, and it's read by all search engines and spiders. And you use this file to say, hey, this portion of my website is off limits. It shouldn't be showing up for any search results. That way, if you have a content management system where a portion of the site is duplicate, for example, maybe you're an e-commerce site and you have /product/red to show all of your products that are red, that category page is going to have the exact same product content that the individual product pages would, and in Google Eyes would look like duplicates. So you could use a robots.txt file to block that section from showing up in search results. The next option is a meta robots tag, which you can use to block individual pages. So maybe you have two versions of a page, one of which you're using as a landing page for paid search, and you don't want that landing page to show up in search results, but you still want users to be able to interact with it on the site. You can use a meta robots tag to tell the search engines, hey, this page is off limits. Don't show this specific page in search results. Your third option, and one of the better ones, is to use something called a rel equals canonical tag. Now, a rel equals canonical tag is used to identify multiple versions of the same or very similar content and to tell search engines the original source. So if you have 10 pages that are the same, and one of those is the original and the best version that you want showing up in search results, you can use the rel equals canonical tag to tell Google, only show this original source. And finally, you have 301 redirects, and this is the absolute best option for on-site duplicate content. If you can, take down the duplicate versions of this content and use a 301 redirect to point those URLs back to the original source. This will pass any link value of links pointing to those duplicate pages, and it'll tell the search engine, hey, we realized we had duplicate content, we fixed it, here's the right page to show. This is your best option. So now that you know what duplicate content is, how to find it, and how to fix it, how do you make sure that you don't have duplicate content in the future? Things can change pretty often. So Copyscape has another tool, a paid tool, called Copy Sentry. It costs as little as $4.95 a month to monitor up to 10 pages, and then you can pay 25 cents a month for each additional page you want monitored. And there's no maximum. So this will constantly monitor any content that you set up. It'll monitor the web and see if anybody else takes that content and posts it up elsewhere. So you can be notified as soon as somebody scrapes your content. And for on-site content, the best way to monitor that is using an SEO Moz tool called Crawl Test. Now, SEO Moz is a Seattle SEO software company. They're an awesome resource. We absolutely love them. And they have a ton of free tools that can help you out with your SEO efforts. Crawl Test, unfortunately, is not a free tool. It's part of the Pro Tool package. And Pro memberships start at $99 a month. But if you feel that on-site content or duplicate content could be an issue, that might be a really good investment. And this Crawl Test tool scans your site up to 3,000 pages, and it identifies a number of on-site SEO errors, including duplicate content. If it finds the same content on multiple pages of your site, it'll tell you, hey, on this URL, this content is used on, and it'll show you up to 5 other pages where that content is being used. Great resource, the easiest way I know of to monitor on an ongoing basis if you have duplicate on-site content.
So now that we've talked about duplicate content, let's move to thin content, which is similar, but also different, as I mentioned in the beginning. Basically, thin content is poorly written, or it's written for search engines rather than users. It's generally light content like product descriptions, e-commerce descriptions. It could be MFA content, MFA meaning made for AdSense, or article sites. And it's really not extremely different from duplicate content, but let's take a look at this example that you see up on the screen. So mesothelioma is it's a cancer caused by asbestos, and it's a huge high-value niche, and it's often targeted by spammers and AdSense site makers. So we used this because we thought it would be a good example in order to find some thin content. So we searched for mesothelioma in Google, and we found on page 17 of Google search results this site. Now, when you take a look at this, you'll notice that the content has terrible spelling. It's very short. There's no unique information here, at least no information that's not published elsewhere. And it's obviously written for the search engines with focus on keywords rather than focus on human readers.
And this is the exact sort of thing that you don't want to see and that Google doesn't want to see. We picked mesothelioma. It's kind of a joke in the marketing world. We're gonna touch on this a few times, but the gist of this is don't do this with your site.
So how do you know if you have thin content? Well, you can ask yourself a few questions really, and these questions come straight from Google's Webmaster blog. But first ask yourself, is this article written by an expert or enthusiast who knows the topic well, or is it more shallow in nature? Second, ask yourself, does this site have overlapping or redundant articles on the same or similar topics with slightly different keyword variations? And third, ask, Are the articles short, unsubstantial, or otherwise lacking in helpful specifics?
So there's actually about 15 or 20 different things in this list. You can find it bit.ly/thin content, and that's straight from Google. It's a list of all of the elements that they believe contribute to thin or low quality content. Give you a list of do's and don'ts. If you read through this page and then consider the content on your website, just adjust course accordingly. It's really not too hard to spot. You should know if your content qualifies as thin after reading this article, and just go from there.
So now we've covered duplicate content and thin content. So let's take a look now at an ad to content ratio, which is another of the factors that can cause pandalization. So what you're looking at here is actually one of my own sites, and we've highlighted the ads on the page. In the red circles, you can see some AdSense ads, and then in the blue circles there, you see some affiliate offers. So those in the blue circles, those links and photos are actually links that go to Amazon. And whenever somebody clicks those and then makes a purchase, I would make money. So needless to say, this site was hit hard by Panda. And now that you know that, that an ad-to-content ratio is a reason for pandalization, it's really not hard to see why this was hit. Basically, usability is number one with Panda. The Panda algorithm began with actual user testing of search results, and what they found was that too many ads and or affiliate links were found to negatively impact usability. So nobody knows what the exact ratio should be, but you know, we would guess something more than 50% content to 50% ads. Maybe 60 content to 40 ads, maybe 70-30. You get the idea. But needless to say, there's way too many ads on this page as compared to the amount of content. So back to our mesothelioma example. This is another website that we found by searching for the same keyword within Google. Again, it was buried deep in the search results for good reason. But what we found on this site was that obviously there are way too many ads and no content. As you can see, basically there are about 4 ads, and then you've got a useless image up above, and then a whole bunch of white space. And this is what we found above the fold. In other words, this is what we could see as soon as we hit the page. The content was, in order to get to it, we had to actually scroll down the page.
Which is something very few users actually do. Only a tiny percentage of users are ever going to scroll down to the bottom of the page or even below the fold. Another issue, though, with this page is the irrelevance of the ads compared to the content. I mean, the topic of this page is mesothelioma, but the image says asbestos, and the ads say 7-second memory, a diabetes answer, the 21-day sugar detox manual, and an inside glimpse of heaven. Now, none of these ads have anything whatsoever to do with the content of the page. And if Google has the ability to read the content of your ads, they're going to recognize that this site is extremely low quality and that the ads aren't even relevant for the page. So just one more hit from the Panda penalty.
What we're looking at here now is an example of a website, campustechnology.com. So when we visited this page, we were immediately hit with a splash page. Which means that before we were able to view any of the content at all, we were hit with this ad right up in our face. So this is another example of poor usability. It works for getting clicks, but if Panda sees it, or if Google sees it, the Panda algorithm is going to penalize something like this. So basically, you need to strike a balance between making money and having usability. Basically, at the end of the day, you know, if it negatively impacts usability, Panda is going to open up a can on it. Splash pages, forced ad views, you get the picture.
This is another example, very similar, that we found on the Seattle Times website. It was another pop-up ad, but this one was a little more shady. It gave you 15 to 20 seconds to start reading the content on the page before it popped up with this ad, interrupted your reading, and forced you to interact with the ad. And you can see that, you know, the close ad button is just tiny up in the right. They're really trying to trick people into clicking on this. So not only did it interrupt the reading, but it's done in, you know, somewhat of a shady way. And these are things, Google can read this. All of these things are coming up in your code. And because Google is measuring a lot of these things directly from the Google toolbar in the browser, they're aware. They're aware of post-load ads and anything that affects usability. So in addition, on this particular page, after we got this pop-up ad to go away, there were 5 ad units above the fold and just one little partial content unit. So from a user perspective, it was a really poor search result page. I just wanted to read this news story, and I couldn't. So there are a number of reasons why ads make a bad user experience. Page load time is one. The more ad calls that a page has, the slower it will load. Even a single ad call can bring your page load time above 5 seconds. More than triple Google's ideal 1.4. It also causes interruption and distraction. Nobody likes to be interrupted when they're trying to do something, nor do they like to be distracted from their goal. On the other end, you also have shady ad usage, making your ads look like navigation or tricking people into clicking. All of those are usability issues that you want to avoid.
So if you've got a high ad to content ratio, how do you fix it? Well, what you need to do is minimize your ads, especially above the fold, and don't use ads to interrupt the user. Next, use more legitimate internal links and topically relevant third-party links in addition to your affiliate links. So, in other words, link out to more authoritative sources relevant to your niche that basically don't make you money when people click them. And at the end of the day, you want to build your site for the user, not just for the money. So we get it. You have ads because you want to make money, but if you don't rank, you're going to make less money. So there has to be a trade-off. If you exist only for the ad revenue and you don't care about the user experience, then Panda is going to Pandalize you.
So this brings us to the next segment that Panda looks at. And this is one of the most common causes for a Panda penalty that I've seen, and that's your link profile. So essentially, a link profile is the sum of all external links pointing into your website from other websites. Kind of like a fingerprint, no two sites have exactly the same link profile. The quantity, quality, trust, authority, and topical relevancy of these links is weighed by the search engines, and then your site's given a value. This is the concept that the original Google PageRank algorithm was based on. And even though PageRank is no longer directly a part of the search ranking algorithm, these components are still weighed on a link-by-link and a site-wide basis. So if your site has too many links coming in from websites that were affected by Panda, this can cause real problems for your rankings. So when that happens, when you have too many links coming from websites that were hit, we call this Pandalization by association. Even if none of the other Panda elements apply to your website, you don't have duplicate or thin content, you don't have too many ads or affiliate links compared to your content, and your page load speed is great. If none of those things are issues, and you're still seeing a drop in traffic that coincides with the Panda update dates, then it's likely that your link profile was affected on a secondary order because of the hit to sites that were linking to you. So Jason actually has a story about this. These links that we're seeing up here on the right are his. I'll let him tell you a bit about that.
Right. So as Sam mentioned, the links that you're looking at now are actually part of the link profile of one of my own sites. And the reason why we wanted to call these out are because it's pretty apparent when you look at these sites that these are the types of sites that were Pandalized. Thus, probably it contributed to the reason why my site was Pandalized by association. When you look at these sites, look at the domain name and you'll see the word article in there a lot. And we know that article directories were a major target for Panda because they're known for low quality, thin content, and they're known for plastering ads all over. So, the point of it is you don't want to have too many links from sites that were Pandalized, or else your site, you may experience Pandalization by association. Now what we're going to take a look at is easyinarticles.com. Some of you may have heard of this site. It's probably the best known article directory out there. It's been used by SEOs for ages to build links. And the reason why we wanted to take a look at this is because it has, because we know for a fact that it was Pandalized heavily. They made it very, they were in the press about it and talking about it. I think, Sam, they were Pandalized something like 93%, 95% of their visibility was gone after Panda.
Yeah, it was in the mid-90s.
Right. So we took a look at this and we tried to, to decipher, why were they Pandalized. Well, if you take a look at this, you can see that the ad to content ratio is pretty bad. There's 2 paragraphs of content. There's 3 ad blocks. And furthermore, if you look at the content, it's very low quality. This would probably qualify as thin content. Now what we're looking at is suite101.com. And suite101.com is another article directory. It's a little more exclusive than Easy in Articles. because they require an application process to become a writer. But nonetheless, it's still a resource that's been used by SEOs to build links for a long time. And it's also known for having lower quality content that may be considered thin content on it. So when you look at this site, it's got ads. The content is just not good.
So we're not saying that creating articles is necessarily bad. There are still some good uses for that. But a lot of these sites were hit because the articles that were being created they were poor quality, they were being done en masse, they were being spun or copied or varied just slightly and then just thrown out solely for the purpose of building links. So the quality of these pages to a user doing a search was very, very low. And really what you want to avoid is having too many of these. Some links, not a big deal. But having 40%, 50%, 70% of your links coming from these types of sites puts you at really high risk to be hit by Panda on a secondary order, even if you haven't already been hit. It could happen in the future. So this is a side-by-side look at some of the sites were hit. Panda 1.0 was going after known SEO target sites and lower quality sites like eZine articles, hub pages, WiseGeek, do-it-yourself, places where you could quickly and easily build content, get links, and there wasn't a lot of editorial elements in place to prevent low-quality content at that time. So these sites were hit really bad. With Panda 2.5, Google's raised the bar. They're going after much higher quality websites, and they're applying the same sort of quality signals to both lower quality sites and higher quality ones. Entrepreneur, Motor Trend, GamePro, PR Newswire. These are good, very, very good user resources, but the way in which the content is being presented is still not in line with what Google wants to see with usability.
So, how do you fix your link profile? Well, link building is the most complicated and diverse part of SEO. So there are no simple or short answers. The good news is that most of the sites that have been devalued by Panda are sites where you do have control over your links, so you can pretty easily go in and remove those. But basically, if you think you've been hit by Pandalization by association, here's what you can do to fix it. First of all, focus on higher quality, safer link building tactics. Try to get links from authoritative, trustworthy sites. Second, don't use exact match anchor text only. You want to use natural variations like your brand name, the website name, something like click here, or the URL itself, as well as image links, images with no anchor text, and on and on. So you can look at the link profile of the top ranking competitors using Open Site Explorer to see what looks natural.
Now, Open Site Explorer is another SEO Moz tool. It's free to go in and use. There's some paid functionality, but most of what you would use it for is available for free. And what it'll do, it'll look at the top competitors who are ranking for the keywords you want to show up for. Just type in their URL, and it'll show you exactly what websites are linking in, what type of anchor text is being used on those links. So you can get an idea of what Google is looking to see for any given keyword niche. If the site's ranking number 1, 2, and 3 for a keyword you're going after, have a set of links that look like whatever they happen to look like. You can mimic that example. You can build links from similar types of sites, use similar anchor text variations, and thus be able to show up well for that. Now, if you have control over some of the lower quality links coming in, particularly from these article sites that we've mentioned, you can go in and shut those off. And that may be something you want to do. But in a worst case scenario, if your link profile is of such poor quality that starting over would be easier than fixing it, you may need to actually move to a new domain name. And a number of people have had to do this post-Panda. If that's the case, if you decide to switch domain names, do not do a 301 redirect. If you do a 301 redirect, you're essentially passing these old crappy links to your new site and defeating the purpose of moving your domain name. So don't do that. Now, this brings us to the final key issue that Panda looks at in the usability spectrum, and that's page load speed. Now, there are lots of tools to measure this. The one we're showing here in this screenshot is straight from Google Webmaster Tools. And Google Webmaster Tools pulls this data, as we mentioned, from the user toolbar. So they're reading the page, the actual full render time, exactly as a user would experience it. Now, some of the fastest ways to cut page load times have to do with reducing ads, simplifying images, hosting images locally, or using caching or content delivery networks. Those are just a handful of things that you can do. There are dozens and dozens of possibilities to reduce that page load speed. But this is why it's so valuable. So in addition to improving your rankings if your page loads faster, it impacts your bottom line. Kissmetrics has provided us with some data. So 47% of consumers expect a web page to load in 2 seconds or less. And so does Google. As we said earlier, Google looks for a load time of about 1.4 seconds to qualify a page as fast loading. In addition, 40% of people abandon a website that takes more than 3 seconds to load. So if your website is slow loading, not only does it have an impact to SEO, not only could it affect you with Panda, but it can actually affect your bottom line. They also found that a 1-second delay in page response can result in a 7% reduction in conversions. So to put that in terms of money, for an e-commerce site making $100,000 per day, a 1-second page delay could potentially cost you $2.5 million in lost sales over the course of a year. So even if you don't want to fix your page load speed for Panda, fix your page load speed for the bottom line. Now, page load speed resources. How do you know exactly what to do? This is a list of 3 links that will help you on your way. Number 1, a list of tips and tricks to reduce page load speed, courtesy of Yahoo. This resource has been built over time, very comprehensive, lists dozens of different tactics to reduce the page load speed. But it's also a very technical list, so if you aren't comfortable working around in the code on your site, have your developer take a look at this link. Number 2, this is Google's list of page load speed info. This is the announcement that they made when they officially integrated page load speed into the Google algorithm. So you can get the details on this straight from the horse's mouth. Number 3 is a link to Kissmetrics, their blog post about load speed. There's an awesome infographic as well as a bunch of other data that has to do with page load speed and how that affects usability. So definitely take a look at these 3 resources. And that brings us to the end of this webinar. So this is your last chance to ask any questions, and we'll start going through those questions in just a moment and answering everybody. So the first question we have, and we covered this earlier, but will you get a recording of the webinar? Yes. This is going to be going up online as soon as this is over. The next question from Red, is rewriting duplicate content when others have taken that content the only solution? No. I guess you could put entirely new content up. That would be another solution. You do have a couple of recourse options. You can obviously send a cease and desist letter to the website that's taken your content, notify them that they're violating copyright, and ask them to take the content down. In some cases this works, but if you're scraping somebody's content, you may not care about such things. So that may or may not work. You also have the ability to contact Google and notify them that somebody is taking your content. Again, though, Google, they're swamped with things like that. They may or may not do anything about it. And if they can't figure out who the original source was, how do they know that you're not the person who scraped that content? So you can try those things, but the reality is you may very well have to rewrite or remove the content entirely. And it really does suck. It's a headache, not cool, and it's an issue that Google has and that they're trying to fix. But for the time being, that's just the way it is. The next question from Dan. Can you be penalized for having too many 301 redirects? And if so, what would be acceptable? So Google's talked about this one a little bit. So have some other SEOs. You don't want to have a ton of 301 redirects. And by a ton, I would say thousands. But having hundreds of redirects isn't an issue. And if you're careful with the way you do it, hundreds is usually all you'll need. Obviously, if you're running a gigantic e-commerce site, you may be looking at a very different beast. And if you have to have thousands or tens of thousands or even millions of 301 redirects, do what you have to do. But it's better to point Google to the correct source and capture link value from your duplicate pages than to simply do nothing with it. Looks like the next question from Christian is, can you make a list of the links and resources mentioned in the webinar? Yes. So all of the stuff that we've mentioned in here, it's in the notes on the slide deck, and the slide deck will be posted up after the webinar. So you will have access to all of those links and resources. And it looks like somebody else is asking for a recap of the first few elements of the Panda, what Panda looks at. It's in the webinar deck. You'll be able to get that afterwards. Just as a quick highlight, we talked about duplicate content, thin content, add to content ratio, link profiles being devalued on a secondary order, and page load speed. So it looks like we have a question from Frank. He says, what do you do if your site is based on data and charts rather than text? And you could also add in images or Flash. So there's really no way around this. Google wants to see content. There are some instances where a website, maybe it's a better user experience with just images, but if a search engine can't figure out what a page is about, then you really don't have the ability to rank well for that. So you have to serve two masters with that one. You can use a couple of resources. You could use collapsing divs to have content that's available on the page for users to get to. It's not immediately available. But to compete, if somebody else is using content, good text content, and you're not, the odds are good that they're going to rank ahead of you. All right, looks like we have another question here from Reggie. Let's see, how do the Panda guidelines compare to ranking guidelines on Yahoo and Bing? There are differences. So Bing is not known to have the most terribly advanced spam algorithm. They do put some effort into that, but it's not as focused as Google's. Ideally, though, since Google makes up the largest percentage of search traffic, you're still going to want to cater to what it is that Google does. So avoiding duplicate content, having fast page load speed, having a good high-quality link profile, all of those things will benefit you on both Yahoo and Bing. You're not going to get any penalties there for having good things in Google's eyes. So if you optimize for Google high quality, you should be fine on Yahoo and Bing. And it looks like we're out of time. So that's the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, you can always email and follow up. We'll have the slide deck up online shortly. Thanks for attending.